bits of brain, it's kind of hard to look at intact human behaviors and, frankly, you think about ideas like free will is falling into the picture, and still going in that direction, and you gotta start thinking about law in the brain.
Is that where that part was?
Free will. How much free will do you think we have?
Well, sort of the way I think of it these days is, if there is free will, it's in all the boring places.
What?
Sort of how many buttons I closed on a shirt before I got wired.
Oh, in other words, there's free will about how you button your shirt.
Well, secretly, I wouldn't do this much in that domain.
So if free will is not happening, what is happening? What is it? We're all working in the background here, and we don't. Whatever comes up to consciousness is just like a TV show.
I'm not sure quite what that's implying.
No, I mean, it's just sort of entertaining to find out what decisions are being made that we have no control over.
You must find it interesting.
Pardon?
You must enjoy this. You just put it up.
Yeah, well, I like Alan Alda, and Sapolsky has great hair, although he's got it in a bun. Have you ever seen him with it? You know, I watched one of those video courses with him doing a whole 30 hours or more on violence. Why mammals are prone to violence. He's the monkey. Most of his work is with the great apes. But then you apply it to.
Earning enough money to pay. It wasn't really me. We have a whole lot more trouble with.
So that does tie into how I want to talk about today. So I had both a video and a reading posted by Professor Jamison. I don't know if you had a chance to look at them. The reading, in a sense, follows more what the video talks about. So in a sense, I should have suggested watch the video first.
Oh, they probably have been more entertaining.
No. But nonetheless, the video, she talks about ontology in general. And then when you go to ontology and art, it makes more sense. So the issue really is, what is ontology? She does refer to Willard Quine on what there is, but it goes all the way back to the first philosophical questions to the Greeks, trying to figure out what are things. And you might think, well, we don't really have an issue with that. And actually, that's the point of view that she takes, is that really, pragmatically, the best theory is really just sort of cooperate with everyday common sense. That, we've got these things, we've got all kinds of things, different character of things. So you might talk about love, you might talk about opportunities, you might talk about the set of horses, things that are horses. You might talk about numbers. She does an awful lot talking about numbers and the problem. If I have 2 cups on a table, I don't think we have 2 cups on any of our tables, but if you had 2 cups on a table, then you have 2. And so 2 must exist. So numbers exist if we have 2 cups, right? So in a practical sense, nobody really gets upset about any of those kinds of things. You don't get all concerned about it. There are still amazingly serious, legitimate problems with defining things. We've talked about persons. How many folks feel like a corporation is a person? You've heard that issue, right?
Yeah.
Right? A lot of my friends actually feel like, since when did corporations become a person? We should, tell the government stop treating corporations as a person, so that they can be sued and all different kinds of legal things. that corporations are, in a sense, protected from, because legal persons are protected from those things. So all the characteristics that protect persons are also protecting corporations, and so a lot of people feel like that's wrong.
Yeah,
So they,
but when you weigh the benefits of how much capital they produce in the economy, it's kind of worth it.
yeah, well, corporations is kind of an interesting history in itself. When they started, how they began to really increase economics because of the protected nature of the organization and so on. But what my friends seem to miss is that the actual definition of a person today includes corporations completely. So it's not an easy fix. It's not like you'd say, just stop giving corporations personhood status. That doesn't work, because you're a person because of the same characteristics that a corporation has. You're intersocial, you make decisions, you're self-reflecting, so corporations are that too, right? The United States, in that same sense, is a legal person, right? And so on. So what we mean by person, I don't know if I'm pretty sure I showed you my definition of a person. Is that weird? That's one of my relatives, but she was so proud of her belly before. The baby's over a year old now, and I asked her permission, can I use this on my, and she said, oh yeah, it's my favorite picture. It's mine too, and then she didn't answer it, but that was weird. What is a person? Have I shown you this? No? So I've stolen this. Remember the concern I have with plagiarism and how confused I am about that. But so I'm referring to the two sources that I used to plagiarize this, which makes it not plagiarism but research, right? The one is Peter Singer, who I think one of you is doing as your term paper. And the other is John Rawls. Peter Singer does talk about a person as a person status, and John Rawls talks about a citizen. So they're a little bit not the same, right? Because a citizen is not quite a person. But the main things, and I have altered it a little bit. The main thing from Peter Singer that I've altered is that I say that, or could be expected to become a person. So when he says a fetus, you don't want it, throw it out. In fact, he gets worse, and he says, actually, according to the argument, if you can delete a fetus, you might as well say the same thing of, say, a 2-year-old. You don't want it, It's not a person yet because it doesn't have that self-reflective capability yet until it passes the mirror test and has the conceptual schemas that are necessary for it to think of itself as a self. What Thomas Metzinger refers to as the the phenomenal self model, right? Thomas Metzinger, phenomenal self model. Yeah, so PSM, and the accompanying portion, which he says you have to have both to be a person, is PMIR, which is the phenomenal model of intentional relationships, something like that. So this is essentially the program that you're running inside your head that enables you to conceive of yourself as a self, although you can't actually see that model. It's like Kant's, remember Kant's ego, you can't actually see it, but that's what structures our perception, right? So your cultural, linguistic experiences, etc., have structured what you conceptualize as you, and it's through that filter that you're essentially experiencing the world without actually realizing that you were looking at that through that filter that is yourself. And corporations can do that too, etc. So it's a program that has to be installed. And so Peter Singer basically says, well, and so if you're too young yet, you don't have that installed, so therefore you're not a person. And our legal concerns are over persons, so essentially now a lot of people think Peter Singer is horrible, but actually I think he's suggesting that if you're going to allow abortion, your argument really covers all the way up to when that personhood status develops. So you might as well treat 2-year-olds the same way, right? Now, I don't think Singer is actually suggesting we can destroy 2-year-olds if we don't like them. Because who likes a 2-year-old, right? You know, that would get rid of a lot of future people if we just started deleting 2-year-olds that we don't like. You know, I mean, mothers would basically just, one day they have children, the next day not, you know. Didn't you have children? No.
So underneath that thought process as well, and I think you're right, it sounds like he's trying to make the point.
Yeah, I think he's trying to get people, because he's against killing meat, animals. He doesn't think we should eat meat. Chickens, you know, we shouldn't be mean to chickens.
Because under this thought process,
test bunnies.
I mean, couldn't it work in kind of reverse as well? Let's say you're an adult and you have some kind of accident, you know? Say you don't recognize yourself in the mirror.
Well,
can't
absolutely.
Remember.
Absolutely.
You know, are you no longer a people? You know?
Exactly.
So.
Exactly. You know, so this shooter, well, he took care of himself, apparently.
Oh, yeah.
But had he not, I think no one would have felt any concern for his personhood when they went into the room with whatever they had. Just got to be careful if his whole back wall is all glass and you just start shooting at him, you're shooting outside too. So, fortunately, he shot himself. Why did he wire $100,000 to the Philippines the night before or
I
something?
just saw that on the news.
Was that his wife in the Dolphins?
I thought she was in Japan, but maybe.
I knew that his wife was overseas, but I don't know that.
Oh, that's your.
Oh, she's a girlfriend.
It
There's
was,
so much information, yeah.
well,
Sorry, I keep bringing it. That's not out of. You can't delete that out of your consciousness.
It's in the national
But what-
consciousness right now.
I found it funny, like, in the first day of investigation, there was 10 guns, and then now it's up in the 20s.
23, I think.
Yeah. It was
In the
really-
room, yeah.
In the hotel room. I was like,
Yeah.
how could you only count 10
Yeah.
at first?
There's
But
10 in the hotel and 18 at his house. And I was like,
It's interesting.
they
Yeah.
were hidden under the bed.
Seems to me it would have been like, you know, in the Lord of the Rings when they're trying to get in to see the king and they said, drop your weapons, and they're. You know. And of course, the main weapon still gets in the room. You're not going to take an old man's staff, walking stick. I have one of those. It's from Texas. It's pretty cool. Hand carved. And it was free. So when we talk about a person, we're talking about a program that has to be working properly too. So yeah, you can delete people that don't behave properly. In a sense, they've deleted themselves from the contract. So personhood status is a social contract. But in order to maintain your status, you have to behave accordingly. So when we think of, you know, the reasons why something wouldn't be a person, these are 8 issues that are really, have been for years, popular discussion points because we see clashes among our American cultures over them. So euthanization, you know, should we allow people to be euthanized, right? And by the way, I've tried to write these so that I'm not taking sides. I'm just reflecting from a neutral standpoint. This is the issue, you know. So if we say it is an intolerable pain and it cannot be alleviated without it being killed, that is euthanized. In this situation, both it and others redefine it as not a person. That's assuming that they actually ask. I mean, I've been in that situation where Donna's grandfather was in intolerable pain, knew he was dying, didn't want to suffer anymore, and I came in to visit in uniform, and he said, "Take me out." You know, I forget exactly how he said it. But it was like, stuff the pillow in my face, whatever, anything. And I was like, oh, geez, there goes my clearance, there goes my future, there goes, I can't do it, Grandpa, and he says, that's the stupidest thing you've ever done or said, right? And it's like, wow, what a last thing to leave him with, But he was wrong, and I couldn't do it. I could suggest to the nurses, can you up the medicine? He's in pain.
Now, would you have been wrong if you left him a gun?
Left him a
gun. If you gave him the means, well, whatever way.
yes. Number one, he wasn't the kind of person who knew how to use it.
I think you could probably still get in legal trouble if you left the gun.
I'm not sure. But yeah, I'm pretty sure that they would not have been happy with it.
How did you get that?
I don't think you're allowed to take weapons in the hospital, right?
Well, this was what? This is 20 years ago.
Grenade might have been okay. No, I'm kidding. I shouldn't. That's terrible. But so, that's one of the issues we argue over. And obviously some states have approved it. I think Oregon currently, Australia, the Netherlands famously. The bishops are totally upset about that because they feel like what actually happens is there's social pressure on the terminally ill to end it, because it's so expensive. And so everyone's kind of like, wow, you've got terminal illness, so how are you going to take this? Jump off a building, what are you going to do? Walk out into the ocean.
It's funny as well, and just because you mentioned it, a social contract now, in a way, dictates what a person is. So how does that extend to, say, a government? If I've got someone and they're living completely outside of that social contract, in a different country, in a different side of the world, do we have to consider them a person? Do we have to consider if we want to kill them?
So it doesn't depend on your genes, your human, because obviously a fetus is human, but if we're going to say it's not a person, so we can kill it, study it or whatever, it gets worse when we create pigs with human parts. Now they have human tissue.
Oh man!
Right. I mean, and they are actually doing stuff like that.
And they're delicious.
Thanks for that. There goes my breakfast. Actually, all I had was a donut. So. But there was probably pig fat in the donut.
Right.
It's people. Soylent Green, right?
Aborigines in Africa refer to humans as long pork.
Yep. Taste of chicken, says Eddie Izzard. But so my first criteria for something to be a person is that it interacts with other individuals that consider themselves as individuals. So nations, perfectly, they're individuals and the interrelationships that nations have with one another. And the type of individual each is viewed by each individual as defined by the other individual. So North Korea, in trouble. Right? So they are individuals, but are dependent on one another for their sense of what that means. So it's a social contract between individuals, right? It is self-reflecting, or can be expected to be. So that's the after the comma there. That's the part I added to Singer's definition, because I wanted to give fetus a chance, right? I'm thinking give peas a chance, give peace a chance. Greg Mendel says give peas a chance. It's a joke in the gene. It's terrible. Sorry, but it's in my head. It will never leave now. Remember, he's the one that studied peas to find out how the various traits keep reproducing down the line. So in the book he says, Greg Mendel says, give peas a chance. That's, why does he have to do that? Okay, so, but it's self-reflecting, or can be expected to become self-reflecting by the other individuals that actively. So I don't know about ants. I don't think ants are self-reflecting and that they consider one another social members of their colony. I can't speak ant. I can't even speak bat, right? So I don't know if bats are persons, but it would be up to bats to decide whether they were persons. But what do we consider persons? Well, people that we can talk to, that we feel like there's a presence there. There are some individuals, though, that no personhood there. I've talked about my son Christopher, fetal alcohol spectrum disorder. I'm not sure. He's a son that I've had for 35 years. I have favorite moments with him. Others that are absolutely horrible moments. The time he tried to set fire to the house as a teenager, not a good experience, right? All kinds of things. I remember the time we were harvesting a Christmas tree on Elmendorf, and I had all the kids in the van, Ford Aerostar, out back, where we were allowed to look for a tree. And all the others stayed inside the car. Maybe Billy got out, but Christopher was out with me, and he's the one that picked the tree. He says, this tree, okay. So we cut it down. I started pulling it, and that's as you pull it out of its spot with the other trees, that's when you realize this is the most horrible tree you've ever found. Because as you pull it out, you discover that most of the branches you thought were part of it were part of the trees that were like interlaced with it. So you've got, this one only has 3.
Charlie Brown Christmas tree.
But you can't just keep cutting down trees till you find a good one. You get one, right? And so this is the one we cut. So this is the one we take. And so he wouldn't help me put it up on the van. And he was big enough that he would have been a big help if he had. But he was adamant, we're not going to have this. And I said, but you can't. You can't have another one. We picked it. You killed this tree. It's the rules, right? And he was so angry with me, he wouldn't even get in the van. It was a cold, snowy day, getting towards evening, so it's getting dark. He's out there in the woods, basically alone. And I'm trying to get him in the van. He would not get in the van.
There are literally wolves out there.
So I figured, all right, well, what I'm going to do? We didn't have cell phones then. So I figured, okay, I'll drive to the MPs or SPs on Almendorf and tell them I've got a boy out there that won't get in the car. And he's going to freeze to death out there, right? Not really dressed for the weather, etc., right? But he won't get in the car. Well, the thing is, I start driving, and he grabbed the handle. So I'm dragging him along. So no, that's no good. So I get out, and he ran away. So I got back in and started. He grabbed the handle. So we were going to be stuck in the woods. But I did finally, after lots of, it was excruciating. I finally got him in the van, and we drove off. And the next day I took him to Charter North Star and admitted it. That was it. And he hasn't lived at home since, actually. I was 16, right? 35 now. that was, we decided, you know, I'm going to kill him. We'll either shoot him or, you know, it's just, I like to be a Mr. Nice Guy. I'll give everybody A's. All you have to do is show up once a week, you know, come in don't totally skip. Just send me your essays. You're the one that bought the pizza, right? It's up to you, right? Mr. Nice Guy. But, you know, there are some things in life that, you know, I have testosterone. It's just, you know, so I think that was the main gift that Pandora let out of the box, you know, was testosterone. So there. Is he a person? I mean, officially, of course, he is. I don't know that there's a specific test yet to determine.
Is I think several of these, and maybe it's accurate, maybe it's not, but people would try to apply them to animals. And how far do you get up that spectrum? You know, a dog, a dolphin, an ape, you know.
Yeah, Caesar. Sorry, that's a movie.
Yeah.
We don't really have a Caesar yet.
Thank God.
You know, Caesar, the ape from Planet of the Apes, part 15 or whatever it is.
Pretty cool.
So, and then it does what the others that define it consider appropriate to its position in its relationship to them. So notice, nothing in my requirements says it has to be human being. It could be Mr. Spock, who is Vulcan, right? Or Ava in Ex Machina or Machina, or whatever, right? I mean, you know, a really smart turkey. Ben Franklin.
The new Blade Runner movie is coming out, so I saw a news article this morning asking if it was.
Is that a new movie or a
No, it's a sequel.
It's a sequel.
I don't know. Yeah,
It looks amazing.
I'm not going to watch it either way, but I saw the article and asking if
So the main character is Descartes.
No, he's, yes, sorry, he is, yes.
Just like the way he said it.
Yeah. I'm not, but it just has to
Yeah,
do with
I love it, though.
No, it's Harrison Ford in it. I love Harrison Ford.
Yeah, and
Yeah,
that's Deckard, yeah.
But he died.
I don't like the other guy.
Wasn't he killed in the one movie with his son?
It's like
And Star Wars.
Oh.
Oh, so he's a different guy in the oh. But Descartes. Who's the philosopher named Descartes? Did you ever think about that? So, you know, is Descartes a real person? No, he's a replicant. We talked about this.
You're still talking about Blade Runner, right?
Descartes.
Yeah, he's was the replicant, wasn't he? He's the police officer. He's Harrison Ford's character.
Right.
Yeah. He was a
At the
replicant.
Yes. At the end, it turns out he's a replicant.
Did I really miss that? The girl's a replicant.
Right, but at the very end, he also finds out that all his memories were implanted. He's a replicant himself.
Look that up.
So the interesting.
I know, right?
So the interesting analysis of it, I gather that it's more evident in the director's cut than in the original. Does that make sense? There's some other indicators in the end that point out that he's a replicant himself. But the interesting commentary on that was in one of Slavoj Žižek's books, where he emphasized Descartes, essentially Descartes, and that kind of cogito ergo sum is, in a sense, a philosophical puzzle that, in a sense, Descartes has posed for us. Right? What is a self? Is he a self? Because he's a replicant. Whoa, wait a minute. Does that mean he's a real person?
I was literally trying to explain to my wife what Blade Runner was the day before yesterday. And she goes, "You mean the vampire movie? Is Wesley Snipes going to be back?" I'm like, "No, completely different." I realized maybe I don't even know. Maybe I need to go back and watch it.
whenever I think of vampires, I think of those German musicals, or the French musicals. Sorry. I'm mentally ill, that's all there is to it. I can't get weird things out of my head. But so of the 8 issues, and I'll just quick go over these because I want to get really to the meat of what she's talking about.
She has no meat. Bullshit. Sorry.
Let's not go there.
Sorry.
Let's not go there. So remember, I'm copying this. So.
Sorry, apologize.
Okay, so I mentioned euthanasia as an issue, but a second one is suicide. Obviously the family or others still love it, love the person, think of them as a person. But if they commit suicide, it seems at least like that they have stopped thinking of themselves as a person because they thought it was right to kill themselves. You can't kill a person. By social contract, you can't kill a person. But it is not worthy of respect due to a person, etc., because it acts as a member of a parasitic organism on persons. So, ISIS, right? Or Al Qaeda, or you name it, right? Which groups do you feel like we are, being plagued by these folks, and we should take them out? As a group, right? So we're killing the entire ISIS caliphate, whatever they call themselves, right? Or if it's a specific individual, we define it as not a person and take violent action against it alone, right? So Osama bin Laden would have been kind of in between both, because he was the head of Al Qaeda, but he was also an individual. So either way, he goes. And so 5 concerns abortion. I mean, when the woman feels like it's endangering her life, and there's various stages of at what point that's the case, she might think of it as a parasitic organism. We have to get rid of this. 6, essentially, these are folks that are, why should we help them? They're starving, they're living in an environment that doesn't really support life anymore. If they're trying to migrate, well, okay. But if they're staying right there, what's our social obligation to feed them? Remember, Thomas Malthus says that that's just nature taking its course. Maybe by feeding people that are in a starvation environment is just making the problem worse. I mean, you can go either way on this, of course, right? But that's, so the folks that argue we should not be feeding people in such a situation, because now we've got more people than ever in that same situation, so they're all even more dependent. It doesn't even have to be there. It could be in Philadelphia.
Aren't they discussing this? Weren't there protests in downtown Anchorage like last week?
Exactly. We're enabling them to, I didn't say thrive, but we're enabling them, right? And you think, well, what would happen if we just closed down all of the support? What would happen? Where would they go?
My favorite part of that, if you watch the video online, was this one homeless lady went over and they had mounted up all of the empty booze bottles they had collected. She goes over and she goes, "Those aren't all ours." Like she had a preference. Those aren't all ours.
So, 7, I think, next one would be the animals that we eat. Maybe even the plants too. I mean, so we don't think of those as persons. We don't they don't act the way a person should. It's a pig. But instead, it's part of the environment that can be used as needed in support of a person's life. So I feel like it's right for us to kill these animals in order to eat. And last, it's like trees and rocks. But we also have to be concerned about maintaining it because, well, without the forests, without the oceans being healthy, the atmosphere dies and then we die. So we do have to be concerned about it, but it's part of the environment. But these are just parts of the issue concerning a person. When you get to what she's concerned about, of course, we've got science on the one hand, and we've got the humanities on the other. And science talks about particles, atoms, molecules, quarks, things of that sort. So even when we're talking about tables, she loves to talk about the table, right? And you're thinking, what about the table? Well, we don't really, in a commonsensical way, have any qualms about saying that tables exist, that it's a real thing, etc. But theoretically, a physicist, right, would say, it's particles arranged in a table-like image. So if we're trying to figure out what actually exists, tables in a sense only exist because we classify the organization of the particles at that level as saying these make tables, tabletops, or right. So we have concepts that we create because of practical reasons. We need a new table. That one fell apart or something. Whatever, right? But if we look at scientists, in a sense, they kind of not thinking about tables. They're thinking about photons, neutrons, the standard model, right? So if we look at what exists, so this is the standard model. Hopefully I've got a nice picture here. Where is it? No picture? I needed a picture. I want a picture. Go back, get a standard. Is that going to get, okay, so that's what exists. If you're a scientist. Well, but that's just if you're a particle physicist, right? If you're a biologist, you don't really doubt the existence of living organisms, right? They treat those as living objects, as cells and so on. But you can imagine there, at what level do we say, now we have an object? Her point is, okay, in general, the practical way of doing this says really what's most convenient, that at multiple levels, and even abstractions. So if I want to talk about numbers as being existing, okay, why not? What's wrong with that? But the thing that idea does away with is the thought that you're somehow trying to figure out what really exists out there. Because that's wrong. There is no real, apart from all of the different ways that we talk about things at all the different levels. So let me add in here something she doesn't talk about, but what strikes me is that she's doing exactly this. She's using Hawking's model-dependent reality. In other words, we have these models at the various levels of discussion that we're talking about, and within that level or that context of discussion, we have objects that we talk about, we have the concepts, and that works. But again, remember, that means there's no real way that the Earth is going around the sun and the sun going around the Earth, or the sun's traveling along in a straight line. I was trying to figure out how the physics of of space-time. So I have for years been saying, you know, so space is curved. And one of the sites I was reading last night said, no, that's not it. It's space-time is curved. So they tried to explain, okay, so if you shoot a bullet, it goes in one direction. If you toss a ball, you know, it goes like this. So the ball goes from the same starting point, the ball goes like this, but the bullet goes like this, right? Well, but if space is curved, why doesn't the bullet follow the same trajectory as the ball?
Bullets do curve over distance.
True.
So what they do, but not exactly the same. It doesn't fall like the ball.
Isn't just the difference energy? I mean, if you could fire a ball at the speed the
The
same.
difference is time according to the space. So if on the graph we have
Oh, wait a minute.
time going here and distance going here, and we fire the bullet here, but we throw the ball here. The starting point was the same, but the time lapse is different. I'm still confused. Because Hawking years ago in A Brief History of Time gave a marvelous metaphor for the curvature, and that was the beach ball sitting on a blanket, right? You know, so the reason the Earth is, it feels like it's going on a straight line, but it actually, keeps going around the sun because of the blanket is curved. But everyone now points out, well, but you know what? That doesn't really work as a metaphor, because the reason that the sun changes the blanket around it is because of the gravity in our environment that we're using to develop the metaphor, right? But if you take away the gravity, what makes the blanket curved space, right? Okay, so I'm confused. I have to go back and read more stuff to try to figure out how this all works. But I think that works. That what we have to resign ourselves to saying is that we have all these different models or contexts or languages that are all practical and work. But the mistake we make is thinking that one of them is true and the others are false, or that there's a reality that we could describe out there. Just in the sense that we're describing it with language, automatically it's not the same thing. Because those are interpretations of that. Okay. So how does this apply to art? It's actually kind of interesting, because this is really recent stuff that she's doing. So she's talking about art that I never grew up thinking of as art. I guess there's some painting or something out there that's designed to deteriorate or rot away, right? Or like the website that she talks about, where it's links to different things that award them, as a website. So you click on it, and it gets a gold frame for the award, and then you see that video that they're awarding. So the website that has the frames is art, and it's selecting video art as the awardees of the thing. But the trouble, of course, is that over time, a lot of the links have gone away, and so when you click on it, you get this golden frame around this great piece of art that says, this link is no longer accessible. Well, is that part of the art? Because that way it's critiquing the internet and so on.
So according to the artist, he said yes, but
Yeah.
and in a way, it is interesting, because there's so many just zombie sites that are just still out there that no one stopped caring for.
Well, it dawned on me, hey, I'm making an awful lot of art. That's terrible, too. It's terrible. But even worse, I mean, I played around with my Oculus Rift and didn't do a lot of painting myself, but I watched a couple of paintings being done. And it's just absolutely incredible. The one I really liked the most was Starry Night, which is in fact, some of you said that was your favorite painting. But Starry Night, but it's in 3D, right? So Van Gogh, of course, just painted it flat, traditional painting. But now what we've got are these 3D artists that, so I'm like standing there as the tree, just suddenly appears next to me. I'm standing there, and I'm surrounded by the Starry Night. Plus, you could put motion into the light. So besides the twinkling of the stars, you could actually have the light kind of moving and so on. So it's just, wow, you're actually standing in the middle of this three-dimensional or 360 virtual reality painting, or you're in it yourself, right? As far as I know, I don't have any way of sharing this with folks unless you've got the devices to, right? You put it on and you're like, whoa. But if I just tried to show it on the screen, underwhelming would be probably the. But if you put the goggles on, it's amazing. Whole new thing of art, form of art, right? But is it real? Is it a real object? Well, she compares symphony and a painting. Now, a painting can be destroyed. Although the thing is, if I think about a painting today,
Van Gogh's real cheap these days.
apparently there's 7 of these. Oh, that's rats. I should look at is that the one I picked? 228 by 320. Okay, that's bigger. Well, you've probably seen these before. A couple weeks ago or so, I visited the museum in Holland, where one of the Van Gogh grandsons, the uncle had children, and he gave a tour of the 6 or 7 paintings that are all on the same theme. He said there was 7, but I think they actually only had 6 at the thing, right? Now, remember, I'm not actually physically there. I'm in my goggles, right? When I say I travel places, not physically going any place, I saw an awful lot of Vegas yesterday, and I didn't actually go there. But here's the question is, I've got this on, I'm looking around and seeing the palm trees. I'm being shot at, probably, because whoever the stupid photographer was like, oh shit, I better hide, but meanwhile he's like filming, the thing, right? And so I'm going through, in a sense, the exact same experience without having to put myself in a little metal tube, fling myself down to Vegas, get shot at in person, etc., right? So that's going to be a really interesting issue. Am I there?
Well, you obviously aren't there. What you're doing is you're experiencing an artist's rendition of that experience.
Well,
just like
it's a video.
Yeah, it's art because it was produced, and it elicits a response from you, which is part of my definition.
I did not wet my pants. because I wasn't really scared.
Because you
Right.
weren't really there.
Because I wasn't really there.
Well, was it in real time? Because that makes a difference too.
That's true too, but what does that mean?
Along with, specifically with Oculus, one of their marketing points was it puts you there. Like, it makes you feel like you truly are there mentally.
Now, this is not in, you're not looking at this in,
Yeah.
but if you had the goggles on, my guess is, yeah, so I can move this around. Sorry about that. Right, so you get the idea, right? So if I had the goggles on, right, I'm seeing this very much. Of course, the quality is getting better. Actually, a lot of the complaints are the pixel, you know, how the farther off you look, etc. You can actually move in that direction. So that's pretty interesting too, right? So like I'm in Starry Night, and I can like walk around in Starry Night, and as I move, I'm actually moving around. There it is. Yeah.
Yeah.
But so if we are thinking of it as art,
Yeah, you could.
if somebody makes it, you know, can you imagine the legal issues? Who has the rights to it? Right, the legal rights. You know what? So if I copied this and then used it as with my avatar up front, which I could do, right?
Well, take your Starry Night example, right? Is that Van Gogh's art? No. Is it the guy who put it into the form of Oculus Rift?
Yeah. You know what? They didn't have his name or anything on there.
And that somebody put a ton of work and money into that to
It's
make
like,
that happen.
it's a drawing. You know, it's like a list of the drawings that these are posted on the web. I don't know how to do it myself. Actually, I'm not making anything of that quality. So if I posted like, you know, it looks like a stick dog, you know, with a wagging tail or something, right? You know, I'm at that level of development in my artistry. That's, you know, not even close, right? But you get the idea. This can become shared. There will be copyright issues, I imagine. You know, how do I use all these things? Yeah, so with these, if you could experience these as if you're there. Obviously. So she brings up an awful lot of interesting issues. What is an object? You know, well, like the symphony, for example. That's funny because the symphony is obviously what? The music. But you give that to an orchestra where everybody gets their part and practices it and then plays it. I've heard the symphony. The written music, though, is what's copyrighted, right? I mean, so when our orchestra plays the music, there's all sorts of types of music copyrights. So like if it's one particular piece that they're going to play, whoever owns the copyright charges a certain amount of money per part or something, right? But if it's a different company, you can, you know, a lot of the high school bands, we'll play this kind of music. It's not so much because the band directors like that music especially, it's because it's the cheapest that they can buy for all the parts for the, right? You know, so copyright ownership of the music is there, and yet I can post videos with music playing YouTube will email me and say, hey, this is possible copyright infringement, and I go, you know, well, or whatever finger is appropriate. And they never take any of them off, but they have given me grief, because like if I'm driving along the road and I'm videoing Red Rock Canyon, right? I have actually gone to some places, right? So here I am in Red Rock Canyon. Now I don't have to go to Red Rock Canyon anymore. I could put my, go, in fact, I've been there since I've been there. Thanks to Oculus Rift, I've gone to Red Rock, and I've actually looked around and I realized, you know what? I'm not hot. I'm not dying of thirst. I'm not in, an air-conditioned rental car that is running out of oil. It happened to me in Vegas once. All kinds of things that could go wrong there, right? Plus, it's more expensive. Well, actually, it's cheaper. A lot of the things there are cheaper. Food and steak and you name it. A lot of that's cheaper there. In fact, some of those casinos, they'll just give you money to come in, right? I always make money when I'm there. But in any case, now you don't have to go. But here I am driving along, and I've got the radio playing because I'm addicted to classical music. My wife is okay with that. So we're driving along and videoing. And then I upload my video, right? And that night, automatically, I get an email saying, hey, possible copyright infringement. What? The music. They're noting the music on there, and they're warning me that I could be infringing copyrights because I'm...
Well, and YouTube is becoming notorious for this because you're not monetizing it, because you're not getting anything off of that video. That's why they didn't strike it. I mean, if you would have been...
Well, I mean, if I went... I didn't pay anything for... I could watch Alan Alda and Sapolsky talk, and I don't have to pay either of them for this.
The ads, though. Yeah. I mean, that's how YouTube makes money. So if you're...
Not off of me.
No, not off of you. But if you're producing content and getting money off of advertisements...
But how long are those advertisers? That's going to... Their advertisements are changing.
It's absolutely true. It's a huge thing on YouTube. You can Google it.
It is. There was a big thing with Prince, the musician.
Oh,
He had I can't remember what the legal mumbo jumbo for it is, but his issue with it was he didn't want any of his work on the internet because he can't make any money off it. He can't control it on the internet. And his issue was, how come YouTube can have scanners for pornography but can't have scanners for copyrighted content? And that was exactly the issue. Is they're not making any money off of it, but it's still shown to an audience, so it should, it still count. It's tricky.
There's a whole generation now of people on YouTube that are just YouTube sensations, and they make money after people go in to watch what they do, whether it's video games or whatever, and they're running into real problems because where they're allowed to say critique a movie or a video game, if they show too much of that content or any of the music, that's all copyrighted, and they get struck by YouTube. I mean, it's an ongoing thing, pretty big deal for YouTube at least.
Even the videos I'm making here, whenever I'm showing anything there, that content is going to be on the video that I'm posting.
You're making a video right now?
Say cheese.
Oh, okay.
Notice I have it facing me
Yeah.
because of the FERPA thing.
Yeah.
If I have students in the video, then I've got to get waivers or all that stuff. Actually, I'm sure it's picking up your voices, and some of your voices, I'm sure, are pretty identifiable. I mean, you could use Shazam to identify the music. I bet you eventually you'll have VoiceAm, and you'll know, oh, that's Morgan talking again. Oh, sorry, I shouldn't have said. Guten Morgen. I fooled them. I'll fool them.
Actually, speaking of that though, did you ever have to get like a waiver last semester because you would take the 360 picture for like attendance?
Right, and I
things?
actually posted those,
Yeah.
but I didn't. I could do that again, actually. See, that's hilarious, actually. See, have I taken a picture in here with this?
I don't
I did,
think
or maybe not. See, I have this. So I could go like this. And I just broke the FERPA violation. Well, not yet, but once I post it. Isn't that cool? That's a video camera too. You can switch it. But thou shalt not drop these.
Page to like take pictures in the winter and like.
Did the university, is that yours or university? Oh.
Oh, no, I thought this.
So,
So it's
I
like this space.
don't get how this works. You post that, it goes onto YouTube, or?
I could post it on YouTube, but where I usually post that is
Just for,
yeah, because Facebook has a way of doing stuff with it. So lovely picture of me in my T-shirt. Sorry about the quality of this, but notice, see, there's the line. See, it's clear on this side and fuzzy here. That's because I dropped it in the museum and the one side became fuzzy. I know. That's really annoying. But yeah, so there's my deck. And my hand. Your hand is huge in these pictures for some reason. So here's me out drinking with my friends. There's Bob. There's Bernt. There's Grant. There's Ron, who's John's brother, and me. How did I get into that group? I don't know. That's amazing. They actually like laugh at my jokes. This is me the last day in my office.
that's why they turned it into a storage place.
Yeah, I don't know. I haven't seen anyone. This is Hatcher Pass. And by the way, you're getting the sky too. So if I, right?
Oh, jeez.
So I know. I know if you use, and my hand, of course. Sorry about that. It's really taught me that I have to clean my nails. And actually, I learned that when I was scanning books. You're holding the page, and then you start reading it later, and you realize, oh, what's wrong with my fingers? It's got stuff. So, objects. I mean, it's not just that. It's all kinds of art that's new today. Plus there's the issue of what if you have to touch up the creation of man, of Adam, in the Sistine Chapel, right?
I think a lot of people would be pretty irritated if that happened, to be honest.
Yeah, well, but they do.
I mean, it happens all
They
the
have
time.
cleaned it up and stuff.
But do they like repaint over it?
I think they did
Like, do
actually
they
recently.
seriously?
Yeah, well, I mean, all the great works of art have had been maintained in some way or another, whether it's Mona Lisa or
Right.
whatnot.
Especially Da Vinci, because he used his own kind of paint. You have to layer it, or it'll just fade away. because
Or
it
are
cracks.
they
Well-
repainting?
Well, the problem with Da Vinci, like with the Last Supper, which is a Da Vinci piece, it was done in the Sistine Chapel was also done the same way. It's done in fresco, which is wet plaster on top of wet plaster. But Da Vinci mixed wet plaster with tempera paint, and that's why it keeps like fading. And that's like we're surprised it lasted so long. But the Sistine Chapel is the same way.
Well, so they have been restoring them,
Yeah.
and so this is a picture of the ceiling before the restoration, and I think actually this one was the after. So there's the post
I like it, made it a little bit more snappy.
Yeah. Yeah, there was a church, I think it was in Germany, that has been restored. And it's like the concept of the Gothic is like dark, dreary and everything. And of course, this is a famous church. It's a perfect example of the Gothic and the art and everything. And they spruced it up. They cleaned it up and got all the grime and dirt of like 500 years or whatever off of it. And people came in and they were horrified because it's bright yellow now. There's no Gothic to it left. And their argument was, well, but you know what? That whole idea that the Gothic was a dark period, I remember even the question of, what good things came from the Middle Ages, the Gothic, being dark and dreary, It wasn't. Actually, those churches were painted to be incredibly enlightening and spiritually gay, happy. I shouldn't use the word gay anymore, it's changed. But you know what I mean, right? Exhilarating, brilliantly beautiful. So has it changed? Is it still the same art?
You could say the architecture itself is the art, because the winged buttresses and just the way they built their cathedrals back then are different from any other time period. So regardless of what color it is, if it's built in that structure, it's Gothic.
It's kind of interesting too, because like, what if you have a structure like that, and then a painting like that? Where does one art end and when the other begin?
Yeah, see, now this article is how not to, but see, this area here has not been restored. This area has. You see what kind of a difference that's going to make in this place? As they clean all the grime off, they become incredibly brighter than they were.
Years of candles and oxidation.
Right. All the things that they used to light these up. Yeah, this is okay. So this is the one that I think I read recently, and part of it is the effect of the stained glass windows has changed dramatically, because of course now it's no longer like the light from the windows is what gives you all the. And part of it too is they've been adding lighting, which wasn't there. You put electric lighting in a Gothic cathedral, guess what? It's going to look different than it did for the Gothic. Well, I don't know. Like some of these places took hundreds of years to build. Some of them aren't even finished yet. In a way. So she tags a whole bunch of interesting questions, and they're still real questions, and a lot of it is because of legal issues. If you're insuring art. Absolutely hilarious. You go into like the National Gallery of Art in D.C. And I brought my old, it's not that old. It's a digital camera, so I could, make 450 pictures or something on a card. Right? But so I'm going through the museum and I'm thinking, okay, so I'm going to mostly try to take pictures of all the art because I'm going to use those for my art class, right? Well, I mean, so I did, oh no, you're allowed to.
Oh, okay.
But the guards are there, and I remember the one guard looking at me because I came in and I went boosh, 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 around the room, and I went to the one painting and she said, nope, not that one. Oh, and I saw, there's a sign. You can't take that one.
Skip probably because they sell postcards of that one.
Oh, the owner has, said no pictures of it. Okay, but all the others you can take pictures of. But I'm just going like this, and she looks at me and shakes her head because that's no way to appreciate these classical, great
it
impressionist paintings. Or But I understood what she was saying with just her body, right? Because she didn't actually criticize me. She just, you know, that kind of, what a, no way. I'm obviously not appreciating each painting for all it's worth. I'm just going boosh, 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 boosh. But I was in a hurry. And what I was thinking of is these pictures can be useful, you know, for class, right? By the way, it's dumb, because now you could just go to the National Gallery and you could take a tour without having to go there. You can see it, plus you read all the stuff, beautiful close-up pictures, way better than my crappy little, you know.
I just wanted to double check, so I looked it up, but the Gothic period was actually during the latter part of the Renaissance, and a big portion of the Renaissance Renaissance movement in art and architecture was that it was darker than what we're used to seeing nowadays. So I can see why they kind of had an uproar when they redid that Gothic period.
Oh yeah, it's a big fight
Yeah.
over that.
So you mentioned it, and you know, the legal problem. Sorry. That the legal is trying to catch up with all these new waves of art, and a lot of it is kind of what you've talked about, the internet, and I think the legal aspect is just one section, and really what it is we're all still trying to struggle with the internet and how this access to this massive information.
Recipes.
And yeah, sure,
Who owns the recipe?
I mean, look at what it did to malls, right? I mean, it is bankrupted. Yeah. But I think it's all of society just struggling with it in different aspects, and this is just what we're seeing with art. You know, is this internet stuff art? Well, you know, like, how do we deal with this? And we're all just trying to figure out our way in this new digital economy.
Your
world.
your DNA.
Yes.
Companies like Gen, whatever, I can't remember the names of the companies, but there are companies out there that own the patent to DNA that's in your body.
So they can grow into pink.
Pardon?
Why is the DNA in our body patented?
Because they patented.
How do you patent something that's organic, I guess, is my question.
Yeah, it was a legal, what was that, like in the early 2000s, there was a legal argument. And they discovered that you can, in fact, patent the material.
So they did it because they can.
Yeah.
So here's how it works. The DNA itself isn't patented, but
Synthetic.
Oh, okay.
synthetic. Well, that's interesting. Because they're some of the early patents. What they were patenting was how to find because when they were first trying to isolate specific genes that did things like cause hemoglobin problems, you know, for the people that bleed and so on. So that they find this, right? Once they find the gene, they patented that. And the process, too, that they enabled to do that, so that they could make money off of any further development.
They patented the process of finding the gene, or did they patent?
They actually patented the actual gene somehow. I'm not a specialist on this, but the sequence. But the thing is, they were the ones that found it, and a big issue. So a really neat way to find out some of the shenanigans in this is read the book, The Gene.
It's a sequence of information, and that's basically what you patent in any patent. If you do a computer code or a design for a new chair, it's a sequence of information that you're patenting.
That's a sequence of information they didn't come up with themselves. That's
Well,
just
yeah,
something
but like,
they found.
They discovered.
there's thousands of different models of a chair, but there's, you can patent one.
You're right on the problem, because wait a minute, who says you get to be the owner of everybody's gene that makes hemoglobin?
The gene has slight
But
variations.
that's how various companies actually then own the patent to the techniques that could be used for the people, right? So that's how they get their money for medicines or techniques that you could use in order to like fix the gene if you're trying to use, genetic I forget the word for it, I'm sorry. You know what I mean. I've got to quit. I need a good quiz question. Should it be something about, you know, how do you feel? Yeah, oh, okay, so yeah, should Genentech, I think that's the name of the one company, Genentech, right?
Sounds like something else permanent. I was thinking.
I mean, this company is rich because they own patents
And they're hiring.
on genetic material. Now, should scientists own patents on genetic material because they've been able to isolate it? I remember years ago when I first started teaching at UAA, Dr. Lishka had on his door a certificate of patent on his own DNA. You know, he's got a certificate that says, I own my DNA, right? And I was like, what? That was 95, you know, or whatever.
What if he had
It was
a
a
twin?
joke.
Oh.
Ooh.
Shared DNA.
Ooh.
Love it.
Ooh. Yeah.
It's good time.
And is it art? Well, I mean, from a scientific point of view, you know, developing a medication that will cure somebody of hemophilia. Not only would the market be there for that, I could see it being expensive. Just think how many czars would have been saved, you know.
It's interesting too because there's a bunch of companies now that you send them a swab and they will run your genetic information, right?
And now they have it.
Yeah.
And by the way, you sign a waiver too.
Gives it to them. Well, somebody did a little study and they went and they did 6 of these and then they compared the results and some of them were vastly different. And that's because different companies were going and following different genetic traits from these different people and extrapolating information off there based off the different research, and they don't all match.
On your syllabus, it says the thesis for the term paper is due. Do you want that at the end of the week or on Thursday?
Is that a thesis statement or something that's like, oh, I'm going to do mine on Neil Stephenson because I think he's a philosopher because he's...
Because I don't have a thesis yet because I don't know, I'm still trying to
Make something
figure
up,
out
yeah.
what to write about. Like, do I, like, if I want to just write about her, if I want to connect it to something in the world, like, I don't know yet. So, because I
You're
have
doing
Judith
Susan-
Butler.
Oh, Judith Butler, that's
Yeah,
right.
and she has a lot of information.
She's hard too.
Well,
You
is
picked a hard-
feminism is something, or
'Cause she
just by
uses-
Alyssa, someone else I don't really follow, so that's why I chose her. It's because it's something I'm gonna try.
Right, but
and
she
learn.
speaks the language of the
the body.
continental European postmodernists.
Mhm.
So, which I think that's very important. You know, you know, in a way, a lot of American analysis is behind the times because you know they have moved on beyond the limits of language in a manner of speaking. It's clear that that's where things ought to go, but Americans don't like that because it's confusing.
Yeah.
So she can say some really difficult things for Americans to hear, which comes across as like gobbledygook almost. But if you're familiar with that language, she's a pro. She knows what she's saying, and she's in that conversation. But it's a hard conversation to join.
Yeah, I just started to try.
So
and
don't
understand
kill
the
yourself,
YouTube
right? You know,
videos of her.
don't beat yourself. You know, relax.
Oh,
Do what
yeah.
you can.
I just
Remember,
don't have a
there's-
thesis, so that's why I was
Yeah.
asking if you wanted it by the end
It's
of the
good
week.
for you to do this.
Yeah.
And I'll give you an A for 3,000 words, regardless of whether no, that's not it. A for you. Yeah. And then I'll say stuff like, yeah. But she is difficult. The whole continental European thing is difficult.
I started with an idea that I wanted to talk about and then tried to find a philosopher that at least somewhat I could reference. Essentially I worked it backwards, and that seemed to work for me. I'm enjoying it.
Yeah. I just chose someone that
Yeah,
I thought I'd
well,
like.
that's how I set people up too, is
Thanks,
I
sir.
pick someone, thank you,
Yeah.
so have fun. She's
Yeah.
well worth it, she's very
It was
important.
mostly, I just didn't have a thesis, so I was wondering if I had to have a thesis by this
Yeah.
week, so.
I think she mostly teaches in Europe too,
Yeah.
but I'm not sure.
Some of her, yeah, the videos that I've been watching have been a little English and mostly French, so.
Yeah, well, some of the European universities where a lot of this conversation takes place is in English. You can go there and the classes are in English because a lot of Americans go and British people go. Because it's hard to find it here. We don't have that advanced a philosophical enterprise in that kind of, we're much more into being connected with science and postmodern speak. We're like, we don't like one another. I don't know if I mentioned Alan Sokol. Alan
I
Sokol.
don't know if I remember.
Alan Sokol is, I'll show you this because that's fascinating. So Alan Sokol, the Sokol affair, or the hoax, right? So he was so convinced that these postmodernists in Europe are not really even doing real stuff, right? It's just a fraud. That he developed a computer algorithm to imitate it. So he downloaded a database of postmodern speak, ran it through this algorithm, out came a term paper or an essay. He sent it to a postmodern journal and they printed it. So it wasn't a real essay, it was computer mishmash of the vocabulary. And in fact, the audience of the magazine loved the article. They thought it was good,
No.
right? Meanwhile, in a science article, at the same time the one published, he published another article explaining what he'd done.
Yeah.
And the scientific community goes, yay, you made them, obviously, the scam artists that they are, right? It's fake,
Yeah.
fraud. Roger Scruton, to some extent, would even agree with that, but not on all of them. But then a couple MIT students took the same algorithm that he developed and ran a science database through it and came out with an essay in science jargon, submitted it to a conference, and it was accepted.
So they
in
did
other
the
words,
same thing that
so they did the same thing that he did to say that the postmodernists were frauds, and it turned
then
out,
is
well,
science
if you
fraud
believe
now?
that, there's science frauds. So the light goes on. We realize, aha, all of these vocabularies we have function like algorithms. But that's why I said, you're writing. What's important is not the specific content that you develop, but that you learn the algorithm to take research and produce a document.
Yeah.
You're
Okay.
learning the algorithm, right?
Yeah.
The algorithm that now computers can just be loaded with and do your job, right? Whoa, that's kind of scary, right?
That's a lot to think about.
Oh, yeah, fascinating. So,
Steal people's Facebook ideas.
there are programs now that take music off the internet and create music based on the algorithm that you define. What kind of music you want, how the tempo should go, etc. So you can create music that's playing the music that's on the internet in a new piece. It is a new piece, but you're using the elements of the music that's available on the internet. It's almost like you're playing the piano, except the keys you're typing is which music from in the internet are you putting together. And so that's a whole new art form.
Like a whole different ball field.
Oh,
That's cool.
really. It's like a meta music. I'm still trying to learn Bach.
don't know.
I saw a most fascinating cellist playing. This is with the Oculus Rift, so it was the New York Times posted it. So I'm in Yamaha's music studio, and this guy is playing the Bach Suite No. 1 for cello.
Okay.
And he starts off and he plays the first part of it, but then now that's been recorded and that's playing in the background while he goes on and he starts playing like a jazz version of it, and then another, and then another, and then and like 5 or 6 different, and including like tapping on the cello, and it was great. It was great. Bach might have even liked it. I don't know. Totally different than he would have been puzzled. How does he keep? Because he was using, of course, like a computer to record the previous sections of it and then play it again, so that you get almost like a whole orchestra of just him. It's fascinating.
Alright, I'll see you next time.
See you next time. I have to go and spend the night at the hotel with my wife to pretend we're happy that it's our 45th anniversary.
45th.
45th.
Well, it'll be my,
Although that won't be till the 7th, but
I'll be my grandparents' 50th next summer.
I'm older than I look, I guess. I don't know.
You'll make it, don't worry.
I hope so.